At 0217 hours local time, a warhead punched through the upper deck of a ship that had never carried a single passenger, and the Petropavlovsk began to burn from the inside out. The drone that found her had crossed roughly 155 miles of contested airspace to reach a fitting-out berth in occupied Kerch. The vessel waiting at the end of that flight was 96% complete, weeks from launch. Almost every dollar already spent, almost every system already installed, and not one day of service behind her. Within minutes, the smoke column standing over the shipyard was pushing 300 feet into the dark, and the glow underneath it was visible from both shores of the strait. She would never carry anyone. That was precisely the point. The place burning that night was the Zaliv Shipbuilding Yard, sitting on the water only a few miles from the Kerch Bridge, inside what is by any measure the densest concentration of air defense anywhere on the Crimean Peninsula. Zaliv is not a naval base. It is a factory. Hulls come in as steel plate and leave as ships, and for the past several years, almost everything leaving that gate has served the Russian military. The Petropavlovsk was one of them, a cargo and passenger ferry built to reinforce the strait crossing itself. In other words, a backup for the bridge. On the night she was hit, several $100 million of unfinished hulls were sitting inside that fence, and every one of them was tied to the ground. That is the part worth sitting with, because it explains the timing. A warship under threat can slip its moorings and be underway in 20 minutes. A ship under construction cannot. It is held in place by shore power cables, by scaffolding towers, by process piping, by a launch cradle, and by several thousand tons of concrete. It has no crew, no fuel load, no working propulsion. It cannot run, it cannot maneuver, and it cannot hide. It can only stand there and get more expensive. Think of a construction loan that has been fully drawn while the roof is still open. Every dollar has gone in. Not $1 of value has come out. 96% is not a milestone. It is the exact point where the loss is at maximum and the usefulness is still at zero. Russia was counting up toward launch day. Ukraine was counting toward the same number from the other direction. But that berth sat underneath one of the most expensive air defense umbrellas Russia has ever deployed. Before anything reached the yard, somebody had to do something about the umbrella. The approach came in low over water. Not high, not fast, not in a single stream. The route ran flat across the Sea of Azov, with the airframes held down near the surface, close enough that the horizon itself did most of the hiding, then split into separate threads well short of the coast so that no single track carried the whole mission. None of that is exotic. It is simply the only profile that works against what was waiting. What was waiting was an S-400 Triumph complex covering the Kerch Strait. This is the outer ring of the entire Crimean air defense structure, the layer that is supposed to catch a problem long before it becomes local. On paper, it reaches out well past 200 miles and engages targets more than 60,000 feet up, and those two numbers are the whole reason the system exists. They buy time. They mean the crew meets a threat while that threat is still an abstraction on a screen, minutes away, with room to think. Neither of those numbers helps you at 4 miles and 80 feet. Picture a floodlight on a tall mast, lighting a storage yard. It illuminates everything in the yard beautifully. It does not illuminate the mast it stands on. The cone points outward and downward at a distance, and directly beneath it there is a patch of ground the light was never designed to reach. An S-400 is built around that same geometry. It is optimized for objects that are high, fast, and radar bright, moving through open sky where nothing competes with them. A slow, small airframe skimming a water surface at low altitude arrives from the one direction the architecture was never built to solve, and it arrives already inside the ring rather than crossing it. Then there is the clock, and the clock is unforgiving. From the first ambiguous return, a duty crew has to detect, classify, hand off to fire control, slew, lock, and launch. Call that 30 seconds if everything is clean and everybody is awake. An airframe holding 100 miles an hour covers close to 3/4 of a mile in that window, which means the engagement problem the crew solved is not the engagement problem they now have. By the time a decision exists, the geometry that decision was based on has already expired. The system did not fail because it was outdated. It failed because it was answering a question nobody was asking. And there is one more detail that makes this section more than a thought experiment. On that same night, the radar station and associated equipment belonging to that S-400 complex covering the strait were themselves on the target list, and they were hit. The umbrella was not evaded. Part of it was taken apart. Radars going dark is one story. But the thing burning inside that shipyard was not just a ferry. Roughly 200 yards from the blaze, two gray hulls sat at the fitting-out wall, exactly where they had been sitting for 11 years. They had no names painted on them that meant anything to a passing observer. Their keels had been laid at a yard on the Volga River more than a decade earlier, and construction had later been moved south to Kerch, where they had settled into that slow institutional limbo that swallows military projects under sanction. Steel arrived. Sections were welded. Deadlines passed. Neither ship had floated a single day under her own power. Their names were Volga and Vyatka, and on paper they were cable-laying vessels. The ferry was the brightest thing burning that night. These two were the most expensive. Because a cable layer in this particular class is not a utility ship. Volga and Vyatka were being built for the Russian Defense Ministry as the deployment platforms for the Garmoniya hydroacoustic network, a seabed sensor architecture designed to listen for submarines across large stretches of water. They were also built with the capacity to lay influence mines, the kind triggered by a passing ship's magnetic or acoustic signature, aimed at vessels, undersea pipelines, and communication cables. Each one, by Ukrainian accounting, is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Stack that against what the yard actually contained, and the strategic weight shifts entirely. A ferry is transport. These two hulls are the installation crew for an entire underwater surveillance system that does not yet exist on the seabed, which is a very different kind of target. Attacking an alarm system is one thing. Attacking the only licensed contractor authorized to install that alarm system is another problem altogether. The first costs you a night of repairs. The second slows down every room that has not been wired yet, for years, and there is nobody else to call. Russia does not have a second pair of Project 15-3110 hulls parked somewhere as spares. And that is where the sanctions math becomes brutal. The steel is not the hard part. Steel is available. What makes these ships expensive is everything packed inside them. Sensor suites, winch and cable handling machinery, specialized technical compartments, and electronics sourced from supply chains that have been under restriction for years. More than a decade to get two hulls to this state, under those conditions. Seconds to make that investment structurally irrelevant. There is no ratio in modern warfare quite like it, and no way to shorten the recovery side of it with money alone. The pattern that night ran wider than the shipyard fence, too. In the same window, air surveillance assets across the Kerch area were being worked over. A Nebo radar installation and a Skala-M complex both reported struck, and satellite monitoring afterward picking up fire at the old Bogarov airfield, where Pantsir S-1 point defense systems have been positioned. Not one strike, a coordinated stripping of the sensors covering the eastern end of the peninsula. 3 separate vessels were hit inside a single yard. But satellite fire detection registered only 2 heat anomalies at Zaliv, and that gap says something very specific about what actually happened inside those hulls. 2 heat anomalies. 3 ships reported hit. That gap is not a contradiction. It is a description. Satellite fire detection registers thermal intensity above a threshold, and it registers what is burning in the open. It does not register what is burning 4 decks down inside a steel box. Start with the ferry, because the ferry is the one that lit up the sky. 96% complete means a hull that is closed, wired, and largely outfitted. It means paint, insulation, cable runs, composite panels, packing material, lubricants, and fuel oil already aboard. A warhead entering that environment does not need to do much work. It opens the compartment, and the compartment does the rest. Fire moves along cable trays because cable trays are continuous by design. They run the length of the ship precisely so that power and signal can reach every space. That night they carried something else. Insulation went first, then the panels, then the smoke found the ventilation trunking, and the fire had a map of the entire vessel. The two gray hulls burned differently, and that difference is the whole point. Volga and Vyatka were not finished. Open decks, exposed technical spaces, winch foundations and cable-handling machinery sitting in bays that were still accessible from above. Less to feed a fire, less to throw a plume, and far less protection for the equipment that mattered. A hit into an unfinished technical deck does not produce a spectacular column. It produces shattered sensor mounts, ruptured machinery seats, scorched cable-handling assemblies, and a superstructure full of communications and mission control equipment that is now slag. Quiet damage, expensive damage, damage that a thermal satellite 50 miles up has no particular reason to notice. The ferry made the picture, the cable ships absorbed the loss, and through all of it, nothing on that waterfront moved. That is the detail worth holding on to, because it is the opposite of every naval strike people picture. No ship got underway, no wake, no evasive turn, no ship's company running to stations, no gun crews traversing to bear. There was no chase, because nothing being chased was capable of moving. 3 hulls stood exactly where they had stood the day before, held by cables and cradles and concrete, while the fires walked through them at their Kerch residents heard the explosions, then the air defenses opening up over the city, and afterward the smell of smoke drifted across neighborhoods well away from the water. By morning, the fires at Zaliv had been recorded from orbit and confirmed by satellite monitoring groups. The Russian Defense Ministry's Undersea sensor program had 2 of its principal platforms sitting in a burned-out fitting-out berth. The Strait's replacement ferry was scrap at 96%, and the radars that were supposed to make all of this impossible had spent the night being dismantled one installation at a time. All of it ended in a single working shift, and none of it required a single Ukrainian to set foot on the peninsula. Count what came out of that night. 3 vessels struck inside a single yard, with major fires reported aboard all 3. A cargo and passenger ferry at 96% completion, effectively written off weeks before launch. 2 Project 15310 cable ships valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars each, damaged at the fitting-out wall after more than a decade of construction. A radar station and associated equipment belonging to the S-400 complex covering the strait. A Nebo radar installation and a Skala-M complex in the same area. Fire at an airfield hosting point defense batteries. One night, 1 shipyard, and a sensor grid across the eastern end of the peninsula that was measurably thinner at dawn than it had been at midnight. But the tonnage is not the story. What was actually hit was Russia's capacity to rebuild. There is a difference between destroying something a country owns and destroying something a country is still trying to acquire, and this strike sits firmly in the second category. Every asset in that yard was future capability. The ferry was insurance against the day the bridge stops working, a second way across the strait held in reserve. Volga and Vyatka were the installation platforms for an undersea listening network that has not been laid yet, which means the network now has no obvious way of getting to the seabed. Under sanctions, the hulls are the cheap part, the sensor suites, the cable handling machinery, the specialized electronics. Those came through supply chains that have been closing for years, and they cannot be reordered on a schedule that matters to this war. Damage to a warship is a repair problem measured in months. Damage to these is a procurement problem measured in years, and procurement is the one front where money has stopped being decisive for Moscow. That is also why the location matters more than the targets do. Zaliv sits a few miles from the Kerch Bridge, inside the densest air defense concentration on the peninsula, in the one place Russia had every reason to consider finished business. Nothing there was hiding. Nothing there was moving. The defenses were not surprised by an unknown threat. They were positioned exactly where they were supposed to be, covering exactly what they were supposed to cover, and it did not matter. Russia spent 11 years building ships that never sailed, and lost them in an hour to an enemy that never came within 100 miles of the dock. On that peninsula, time has stopped being an asset and started being a liability. Every month a program stays unfinished is another month it can be taken away. So here is the question worth arguing about. Which loss actually hurts more? The ferry that was almost finished, or the 2 ships that were never allowed to start? One was weeks from service. The other 2 were the only way an entire underwater surveillance program was ever going to reach the water. Tell me which one you would rather have lost, and why, down in the comments. If you want the next breakdown of how Crimea is being taken apart one link at a time, subscribe and turn on notifications. There is more coming.